In this video, I'm going to help you think about your own reinvention, and we're going to do that by looking at the case study and the reinvention of Matthew McConaughey. He was the ultimate Hollywood rom-com guy and was able to reinvent himself to play more serious roles and award-winning roles. And he did all of this through a process that he called unbranding. And so I've studied it, I've taken the notes, and I'm going to share it with you right here. The 3 steps that you need to follow in order to unbrand and reinvent yourself. And of course, we're looking at a Hollywood star here, but I promise you this is applicable to all of us, especially if you are feeling stuck in whatever role or whatever career you might be in right now. So let's get straight into it. Step number 1 is that you have to admit that you are trapped. Matthew McConaughey, before he could reinvent himself, had to be honest about where he was in his career at that time. And most of us are pretty terrible at this because we don't like facing reality. We don't like looking at what we have created ourselves. And so Matthew McConaughey was quite good at this. He was honest. He said, I was the rom-com guy. I was the shirtless guy on the beach. That was all I was to studio financiers in Hollywood. And so this clarity is really important because if you can't name it, then you can't tame it. And very often, if things are going really badly in your life, then it's easy to name it because it's quite obvious. It becomes much harder when success becomes the cage, when everything that you are doing is the right thing to be doing, but it's actually preventing you from achieving your full potential. To then name that as the thing that's keeping you stuck can be very difficult. And that was exactly the case for Matthew McConaughey, is that he was doing really well doing rom-coms, and he could have had a very lucrative career for the rest of his life just playing that role. His films were making a ton of money. Films like Fool's Gold, Failure to Launch, and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. But he also realized that he wasn't tapping into his full potential as an actor. A very important note here is that there's a psychological principle called the sunk cost fallacy, which says that we keep investing into things even if it isn't working, simply because we've been investing in the thing. Researchers have, for example, seen that 85% of people will keep funding a failing project simply because they've already spent that money. And so we see this in business all the time, but it's also true for our identity, for the success that we've created. When your success becomes your identity, or when your job becomes your identity, because in this instance, it's not simply walking away from something you've been doing for a while, it is walking away from who you are at a very fundamental level. And although this first step is very uncomfortable in having to admit to yourself where you currently are and how you've created your own cage, the second step is going to be even more uncomfortable. But before we get to that, to wrap this up, the thing that you need to do is to have the courage to admit to yourself where you currently are, where you currently find yourself, what is keeping you trapped. And a good way to go through this is to actually just journal about it, is to have certain prompts like people see me as, or the identity that I've created over time is, and to be very clear about what currently defines your life in terms of the roles you play, the career you have, the identities that you inhabit. Step number 2 is that you have to stop feeding the beast. Once Matthew McConaughey was clear on what was keeping him trapped, he decided that he's no longer going to participate in what is keeping him trapped. And so he told his manager to put the word out in town, no more rom-coms. And off the back of that, he moved to Texas, Austin with his family. And he just decided that he's not going to take the calls anymore for people who want him to play those kind of roles. And so for 20 months, he took a sabbatical away from Hollywood, away from the image that he had created. Now, obviously, this is the kind of thing that a Hollywood star can do and that most of us can't do. We can't just take a 20-month sabbatical. We can't just disappear. And there's this very popular narrative on YouTube that says, go ghost, disappear, reinvent yourself and come back. For many of us, that's a very difficult thing to do. You have responsibilities. You have to still show up every single day. But it does make me think about something that I call the 2 boxes problem. So people are really good at putting you in a certain box in their minds, but they are terrible at taking you out of that box and putting you into a new box. That is a realization I had a long time ago. A realization I had a bit more recently is that we are also pretty terrible at putting ourselves into a new box. One of the reasons why we struggle with this is because we always think through the lens of addition. So when researchers ask people to improve on things, what they often find is that people will think about what to add to that situation or scenario instead of thinking about what to remove, what to subtract. And we do the same thing. We think that we want to step into a new role or create a new persona, and we immediately think about the addition of things, the learning of the new skill, the starting of the new project. But what we don't do is to think about, what do we need to stop feeding? What do we need to stop doing? And so this is a hugely useful exercise, because this is something we can all do straight away. We can start saying no to the behaviors, the rituals, the opportunities that currently define your life. And the moment you do that, it starts opening up space. It starts opening up new opportunities, because at some point you will have to do something, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I believe that saying no sends a very strong signal, a signal of conviction, a signal that is stronger than when you just start doing new things straight away. And that is because when we start new things, to be honest, our commitment is often quite low. That's why, for example, people who start a new podcast only last for 10 or 20 episodes, because initially it seems like a good idea, then they realize it's much harder work, and then they just stop doing the thing. And so again, it almost, in a way, perpetuates for the people around you and for yourself that you are just stuck in the box that you are in. So it doesn't help you to move into the new box. So the challenge to you is, what can you start saying no to? Because no sends a very strong signal, a signal of conviction. And you have to say no to the opportunities, rituals, and behaviors that currently define your life. Matthew McConaughey went through the exact same thing. In fact, it cost him a lot of money. One of the stories that he tells is that at some point he was approached for a movie. The budget was $8 million. I'm sure for $8 billion he would have said yes. The budget was $8 million. And he decided to say no, because that is what he's doing. The agents on the other side saw this as a negotiation tactic. So they decided to up the price, and they went to $10 million. And he said no. And they thought, okay, well, he's just negotiating. He's playing hardball. Let's go up to $14.5 million. And still he said no, because he wasn't actually negotiating with them. This was what he was saying no to. This was a signal of conviction. And guess what? Over time, the phone calls started changing, and he started receiving calls from directors that he actually wanted to work with, directors that were actually offering him more serious roles. So the lesson here is that you don't need a 20-month sabbatical. You need to identify, what are you saying yes to that is currently keeping you trapped, and then start saying no to it. And it sounds very simple when I say it to you like this. I promise you, in practice, it is going to be really, really difficult. But it's exactly because of that, and because you are showing that conviction, that it becomes easier for you to move yourself into the new box, and for other people to start seeing you in a new and different light as well. And so that brings us to our third and final step. Don't announce, demonstrate. Actions, not words. So after months and months of silence from Matthew McConaughey in the film world, a poster appears. And that poster is for a movie, and the movie is about a lawyer working out of his car. And of course, I'm talking about Lincoln Lawyer. And starring as the main character is Matthew McConaughey. And so after this movie comes out, the floodgates really open, and he lands role after role, Magic Mike, True Detective, Dallas Buyers Club, and then in 2014, he wins the Academy Award for the Best Actor. And he describes his whole arc in one sentence. He says, I unbranded for 2 years to then rebrand. All of a sudden, I became a new novel idea. So I know I said earlier that we have to stop doing certain things, and that is true. But we can't just stop doing certain things. We also have to be very intentional in adding new things, because at the end of the day, we are known for our actions. We are known for what we do. And Professor Herminia Ibarra at London Business School, who studies career reinventions, have also found that we only dislodge old identities when we start doing new things. And so when you combine the ability to say no to things that feed the old identity, and you say yes to activities that build the new identity, then you are on the fastest and most effective path to reinventing and rebranding yourself. Over the years, Matthew McConaughey has now become known for very serious and interesting roles like Interstellar and The Gentleman, like one of my favorite movies. And it's amazing to think of the arc that he has taken through his career in order to achieve this. And arguably, he has one of the best reinvention stories, because being the rom-com guy in Hollywood is an incredibly difficult trap to escape. Everyone wants to see you in that role. It pays well. The Hollywood agencies want to see you in that role. The studios want to see you in that role. your fans want to see you in that role. And to be able to step back from that and to craft and create a new identity, to unbrand, to then rebrand, is one of the toughest things I can think of. And like I've laid out here for you, I think it's something that all of us can do at a smaller scale, perhaps, and in different kind of ways without taking 20-month sabbaticals. But if we become good at identifying what is keeping us trapped, stopping what is feeding the current identity, and then finding new actions that create and brand a new identity, I think you are able to then move from one box to another in your own mind, but also in the minds of other people. And as always, I think this applies to teams and organizations as much as it applies to individuals. So that is it from me. Watch this for another really interesting reinvention story.